Okay, so you know we're going to talk about this boy and girl thing. What boy and girl thing? This is very interesting. Well, anyhow, so we have a dichotomy between not being able to get boys to read and needing books with strong girl characters. And I will move on to say we all, those of us involved with children's books, like to say that there is no such thing as a girl book or a boy book. However, if you have ever been a teacher, librarian, or parent, and I think almost every hand went up except for those who are actual children, you will probably agree that it is really a lot harder to get a boy to read a book with a girl protagonist than the other way around. So, how do we overcome this? And what are your personal experiences, both now and as children? I know that I've just asked a lot of questions, but I'm sure that all of you have thought about this, the boy book versus the girl book, and if that really exists, and how do we get boys to read those, quote, girl books?
I wish it didn't exist, but the label is there, and I think it's kind of up to us to change that. I will say my experience with it, when I'm signing books at an event, most of those books I'm signing to girls, not to boys. And I've had situations where parents have come up to my table with a boy and looked at the books and then said, oh, let's move on to the baseball books or whatever it is. So it is a real problem, and but I do think it is something we can change, and I think it's not only demeaning really to girls and women, but also to boys, not to give them that credit that they're, boys can be open-minded, they are open-minded, and to sort of label a book in a way like that is not fair to them. So I think there are a lot of things we could do. I think talk about books, about why a boy might like a book instead of who is in the book. So instead of selling, if you're a teacher or a librarian and you're trying to sell a book to a kid, talk about why. What is the theme of the book that the boy might connect with? Maybe look for a genre too, or a topic that they might be drawn to. I think it's important to model reading. Men and fathers reading books about female protagonists. And I think also you can make it fun for them. Have a like a March Madness bracket of heroines or something like that, and get all the kids involved in reading books about women, and have open discussions in the classroom too.
Yeah, I think it's sad. I mean, Heather writes about women diving with sharks and going up in rickety airplanes, and boys should love that just as much, I think, too. And I do feel when I go to schools, there's usually, there would be a boy who asks, why do you write mostly about girls? And when I tell them, because when I was growing up, when I was their age, there weren't so many books about girls, and they're very interested. It's not, if an adult asks me why I write about girls, it's usually, there's an edge sometimes to that question. But when boys, they really care about justice, and they really think things should be fair, and I think they can be convinced that we do need to know about girls and women who were excluded from history.
I'm going to read something that Shannon Hale wrote. I'm sure most of you are familiar with Shannon Hale's Princess Academy and many other books. But she wrote this I'm not going to read you 2 pages, you'll be pleased to know. She wrote this as a result of being asked to speak to kids in a school and finding out that only the girls were being allowed to go hear her, because her books were for girls, they were not for boys. So here's what she says. I think most people reading this will agree that leaving the boys behind is wrong. And yet, when giving books to boys, how often do we offer ones that have girls as protagonists, princesses even? And if we do we qualify it? Even though it's about a girl, I think you'll like it. I'm afraid I may have said that at some point. I think many of us have. Even though, we're telling them subtly, if not explicitly, that books about girls aren't for them. Even if a boy would never ever like any book about any girl, highly unlikely, if we don't at least offer some, we're reinforcing the ideology. The belief that boys won't like books with female protagonists, that they will refuse to read them, the shaming that happens from peers, parents, teachers, often right in front of me when they do, the idea that girls should read about and understand boys, but that boys don't have to read about girls, that boys aren't expected to understand and empathize with the female population of the world. This belief directly leads to rape culture, to a culture that tells boys and men it doesn't matter how the girl feels, what she wants. You don't have to wonder. She is here to please you. She is here to do what you want. No one expects you to have to empathize with girls and women. As far as you need be concerned, they have no interior life. So what do you people think of that?
So when I wrote my first book for young people, it was Blue Tights, and it was for teens. And it was about a girl with a big butt who wanted to dance in ballet. And it also talked a lot about how she was treated when she walked down the street. And not only did boys talk to her parts, but so did grown men. And so, is this a girl book? Well, I heard a lot from young men about this book. One who was sitting in the Office of Detention because he was trespassing with his hands, and so the dean gave him Blue Tights to read, and he wrote to me. He was not made to write to me, but he wrote to me, and he said that for the first time he knew what it felt like to be a girl. So I was very surprised to get that candid a remark from him, but it showed me something that, again, I'm always talking about this. I can never imagine what the reader is going to think about the book, and what I think my book is, who I think it's for, and what I think it is about is always different than what comes back to me. And so I've been hearing from young men, not just for this book, but for books that deal with very sensitive subject matter, dealing specifically with girls, and a very hard subject matter to talk about in mixed company. But I've gone to schools, and the boys will raise their hands and share. And so I think we do a lot of underestimating of what the capability is, and I think that this kind of making this division as to who the books are for, it robs these young men of the chance of experiencing something that you can only get in a book. You can't get that experience from watching a film. It comes close, but it's when you're inside a book, inside the head of the character, and feeling all of those gradations of emotion, frustration, triumphs that the other person feels, that you begin to lift up out of yourself a little bit to know that, wow, there is something more than what I want in the world and who I am. And so that's why I don't think we should do anything to specifically to change the books that we are writing to then make them more accessible to, say, what we think boys are and what we think they are capable of. We have to start trusting that they are capable, and that if they're given a choice to read in wider circle and without judgment, that individually they can get something that even they might not have expected that they could receive.
Well, I'll just say that I finished doing something with Kwame Alexander and the crossover, and all the boys in line to get their book signed had the crossover, which is a very sensitive book that touches on a lot of sensitive subjects, and these kids loved it. They knew the characters inside out. And so I think if we tell more stories and truthful, rich stories, we will attract, you know, the spirit of those boys in our work, whether it's about a girl or a boy. I just believe that.
And I just want to say, we do love our girl readers anyway, too. So.
I am not opposed to girls.